If your tomato plant is yellowing, sagging, and dropping flowers, don't pull it out yet. A plant that looks finished is not always dying. Sometimes it is only telling you that one part of the system has gone empty. And the mistake is treating every weak plant like it has the same problem. That is where a lot of gardeners lose half a season. They see pale leaves and reach for the strongest fertilizer on the shelf. Or they see drooping stems and drown the roots with more water. Or they decide the plant is diseased, yank it out, and throw it on the compost pile while there was still life left in it. I have seen that happen with tomatoes in raised beds, peppers in patio containers, cucumbers in small greenhouses, and beans in backyard rows that looked perfectly healthy 2 weeks earlier. The hard part is this: a struggling plant does not speak in clear words. It gives you clues: yellowing leaves, weak stems, flowers that drop before fruit forms, new growth that comes in small and pale, soil that stays wet too long after a rain, a plant that looks thirsty in the afternoon but still has damp soil underneath. Those clues matter because feeding the wrong problem can make things worse. But when the problem really is hunger, when the roots are still alive and the plant has simply run short of what it needs, you can often turn it around faster than most people expect. Not with a miracle product, not with some expensive bottle from a garden center. With liquids made from things most kitchens throw away every week. That is the part modern gardening has made too complicated. A home kitchen produces skins, peels, grounds, rinse water, shells, wilted greens, and scraps that still carry minerals, starches, sugars, and organic matter. Those things are not waste until you send them to the landfill. In a garden, handled correctly, they become a quiet supply line. And the important words are handled correctly, because the same homemade fertilizer that helps a tomato recover can burn the roots if you pour it on too strong. So before you feed anything, look at the plant honestly. If the stem is black at the base, if the roots smell rotten, if the leaves are covered in disease, or if the soil has been waterlogged for days, fertilizer is not the first answer. That plant may need air around the roots, better drainage, pruning, or removal before disease spreads. But if the plant is still firm at the base, still pushing some new growth, and only fading, stalling, or dropping flowers, then it may not be finished at all. It may just need the right kind of help. One of the gentlest places to start is with onion skins. Not the white flesh you cook with, but the dry, papery skins most people sweep into the trash without a thought. Those skins hold small amounts of minerals and plant compounds. And while they are not a complete fertilizer, they can make a useful mild extract for plants that are tired, pale, or slow after heat stress. The mistake is burying the dry skins and expecting fast results. That works eventually, but dry onion skins break down slowly. A tomato that is already yellowing does not have 3 weeks to wait while soil organisms chew through those fibers. If you want a faster extract, water has to do the work. Think of it like making weak tea. A handful of clean onion skins goes into a quart jar. Then you cover them with water and let it sit for a day or two. The water begins to darken. It may turn amber, almost like weak iced tea. That color is your sign that soluble compounds have moved out of the skins and into the water. It is not magic. It is extraction. After 24 to 48 hours, strain it well and pour it around the root zone, not over the leaves. Use it on soil that is already slightly moist, not bone dry, because dry soil can let liquid run away from the root area instead of soaking evenly. Around a weak tomato, pepper, cucumber, or herb plant, this kind of mild feed is often safer than hitting the plant with a heavy commercial dose when you are not even sure what it lacks. And this is where most people miss the point. Onion skin water is not meant to replace compost. It is not meant to carry an entire garden through summer. It is a light rescue drink, useful when a plant needs support without being shocked. That makes it valuable in containers, small raised beds, and tired soil where plants are still alive but losing momentum. The first correction is simple. Do not use it as a leaf spray, do not make it thick and rotten, and do not expect one jar to fix a garden that has been neglected for months. Keep it light, keep it clean, and use it at the base of the plant. That alone can save you from the mistake that ruins many homemade fertilizers. Stronger is not better. Gardeners love to think that if a little helps, a lot must help faster. Roots do not work that way. Roots are living tissue. They can be irritated, burned, suffocated, or pushed out of balance. A weak plant is not a machine that needs more fuel dumped into it. It is a living system that needs the right support at the right strength. And that brings us to the second liquid, because some plants are not starving for minerals first. They are growing in soil that has gone quiet. You can see it after a long wet spell in spring, when raised beds stay cold and heavy. You can see it in tired potting mix that has been reused one season too many. You can see it in an allotment bed that has produced hard for years but never really been rebuilt. The plant may still be fed, but the soil around the roots is not alive enough to release nutrients steadily. That is where rice water becomes useful. When you rinse uncooked rice, that cloudy water carries starches and tiny amounts of nutrients. Fresh, it is mild. It can be used, but it is not the real tool. The real tool begins when that rinse water is left in a covered jar for a few days until it takes on a faint sour smell, something like a very light sourdough starter. That smell is a clue. It means microbes have begun working in the liquid. They are feeding on the starches, multiplying, and turning plain rinse water into something more active. Used carefully, fermented rice water can help feed the microbial life around roots, especially in soil that has been overworked, overwatered, or left low in organic matter. But here is the warning that matters. Fermented does not mean pour it on full strength. That is how people hurt seedlings, and then decide the method was nonsense. Dilute it heavily. 1 part fermented rice water to about 10 parts plain water is a safe place to start. Pour it onto the soil, not the plant. Use it once a week at most during active growth, and watch how the plant responds before you repeat it. If the plant perks up, if the new growth comes in cleaner, if the soil begins to smell earthy instead of sour or stale, you are moving in the right direction. The myth is that rice water is a complete fertilizer. It is not. It is better understood as a soil life booster, a microbial feed, a way to wake up the kitchen garden beneath the surface. It does not replace nitrogen. It does not replace compost. It does not fix root rot. But in the right bed, at the right dilution, it can help the soil start working again. And once the soil wakes up, the plant has a better chance of using everything else you give it. That is the quiet difference between feeding a plant and feeding a garden. A quick mineral drink may help a weak plant get through a rough week, but living soil is what keeps that same plant from falling behind again. If you have ever watched a bed produce well in May and then seem exhausted by July, you have seen this problem. The first crop pulls hard. Rain washes nutrients down. Heat dries the upper soil. Roots fill every inch. Then the gardener keeps watering, keeps hoping, and wonders why the plants look hungry, even though the bed was good soil at planting time. Good soil is not something you buy once. It is something you keep alive. But there are times when soil support is too slow by itself. A plant already fading today may not have a week to wait for microbial activity to build. A pale tomato, a stalled squash, or a pepper that has stopped pushing new leaves often needs a faster nitrogen source. This is where the refrigerator becomes more useful than most people realize. Look at the bottom of the crisper drawer. A soft tomato, a few limp spinach leaves, a bruised cucumber, the outer leaves from a cabbage, a handful of wilted lettuce that nobody wants in a salad. Most homes throw those away because they are no longer good food for the table. But to a garden, they are still loaded with plant material, moisture, and nutrients, especially nitrogen. Nitrogen is the nutrient most people notice when it is missing, even if they do not know its name. The plant loses that rich green color. Older leaves begin to pale. Growth slows down. New stems look thin. A tomato plant may still be alive, but it no longer has the push to make leaves, flowers, and fruit at the same time. Now, this is where gardeners often make the wrong move. They bury fresh scraps right beside the plant, thinking they are feeding the roots. What they are really doing is creating a little pocket of rot. As those scraps break down, they can heat, smell, attract pests, pull oxygen out of the soil, and irritate the roots before the plant ever benefits. Composting is useful, but half-rotten scraps sitting against a tomato stem are not compost. They are trouble waiting to happen. The better method is to make a diluted liquid digest. Chop the soft green scraps into small pieces and put them in a bucket. Cover them with water. Keep the scraps pushed under the surface with a plate, a clean stone, or anything that will not rust or leach into the water. Cover the bucket loosely so gas can escape, and leave it somewhere outside, away from the kitchen door, because this one will not smell like roses. After about 10 to 14 days, the liquid will turn dark and strong. That smell tells you decomposition has happened in water, and the nutrients have begun moving out of the plant tissue. Strain it carefully. Do not leave chunks in the watering can. Then dilute it well before it ever touches the garden. This is important enough to say plainly: never pour vegetable scrap liquid full strength onto a plant. A safe working strength is roughly 1 part scrap liquid to 30 parts clean water. That sounds weak, but weak is what you want. A hungry plant can use a mild, steady feeding. A concentrated blast can burn root hairs, shock the plant, and leave you worse off than before. Apply it only to the soil around the root zone. Do not spray it on leaves. Do not splash it on fruit. Do not use it on lettuce or herbs you plan to harvest the same day. Used correctly, this kind of diluted green scrap liquid can give a tired plant a noticeable push, not because it is fancy, but because it is supplying what the plant was running short of in a form that reaches the root area quickly. You may see deeper color in new growth first. Then small side shoots begin to move. Then flowers hold better because the plant has enough strength to support them. But there is a catch. If the plant is yellow because the roots are drowning, nitrogen will not fix it. If the soil is compacted, sour, and airless, feeding more liquid into it may make the problem worse. That is why you always check the soil before feeding. Push a finger 2 inches down. If it is wet and cold, wait. If it smells rotten, stop. If the plant is wilting in wet soil, the problem is not hunger. The problem is roots that cannot breathe. That one observation saves more gardens than any fertilizer recipe. And it leads to the next mistake: treating every yellow leaf as a request for nitrogen. A plant can yellow for several reasons. Older leaves turning pale may point toward nitrogen. Yellowing between the veins may point somewhere else. New leaves turning yellow while veins stay greener can be a different issue again. Water stress, pH problems, cold soil, root damage, pests, and disease can all wear the same disguise. The visible symptom is only the start of the conversation. That is why a balanced homemade tonic can be more useful than guessing one nutrient at a time. Not because it is a miracle, but because struggling plants often need several small supports together. Potassium for flowering and water movement, calcium for strong tissue, magnesium for chlorophyll, a little nitrogen for growth, trace minerals for steady function, and microbial food to help the whole thing become available. You can build that kind of tonic from a few ordinary kitchen materials, but only if you understand what each one is doing. Banana peels are the first piece. They are not magic, but they do bring potassium into the mix, and potassium matters when plants are flowering, fruiting, and trying to handle heat. A tomato short on potassium may produce weaker fruit, less steady growth, and less resilience when the weather turns rough. Peels break down slowly in soil, so soaking chopped peels in warm water helps extract some of that value faster. Eggshells are the second piece, and this is where a lot of internet gardening advice gets sloppy. Yes, eggshells contain calcium. No. Tossing a few crushed shells around a tomato plant will not instantly cure blossom end rot. That black, sunken spot on the bottom of a tomato is tied to calcium not reaching the developing fruit properly, and extension guidance often points out that uneven watering and root stress are major causes. In other words, the calcium may be in the soil, but the plant cannot move it where it needs to go. That means eggshells can be part of a long-term calcium plan, but they are not an emergency switch. For a homemade tonic, the shells need to be rinsed, dried, and crushed as fine as you can make them. Powder is better than chunks. Chunks may sit in the soil for months doing very little. fine particles release more slowly than a commercial soluble calcium product, but they still belong in a steady fertility system, especially when they are combined with organic matter and consistent watering. Then come used coffee grounds, and here we need to clean up one of the most stubborn gardening myths. Used coffee grounds do not turn ordinary garden soil sharply acidic. Fresh coffee can be acidic, but used grounds are usually close to neutral. University Extension advice has been saying this for years, yet the old myth keeps moving around from one garden forum to another. So, if you are putting used grounds around blueberries hoping to acidify the bed, you are probably going to be disappointed. But that does not mean used coffee grounds are worthless. They add organic matter. They can help feed soil organisms. They can improve texture when used lightly. They carry a little nitrogen that releases slowly. The key is lightly. A thick mat of wet coffee grounds can seal the soil surface, shed water, and grow mold. Sprinkle, mix, or steep. Do not plaster the bed like you are laying concrete. This is the difference between useful old-school practice and kitchen waste chaos. A good homemade tonic is not just dumping everything in a bucket because it sounds natural. It is using small amounts, giving them time, diluting them properly, and applying them where the roots can use them. The plant does not care that something came from your kitchen. It cares whether the chemistry around its roots is balanced enough to keep growing. For this balanced mix, combine chopped banana peels, finely crushed eggshells, a small handful of used coffee grounds, and warm water in a covered bucket. But there is one ingredient that makes the whole mixture work faster, and without it, many gardeners end up with a bucket of wet scraps that takes far too long to become useful. That ingredient is blackstrap molasses. Blackstrap molasses is not there to sweeten the soil. It is there to feed the workers. That is the piece most people miss. The living organisms in a bucket of homemade fertilizer need energy before they can break materials down. Banana peel, eggshell, and coffee grounds will release something on their own, but they do it slowly. Add a spoonful of blackstrap molasses, and you give the microbial life in that liquid a quick food source. The mixture becomes more active, more alive, and much more useful in a shorter window. You do not need much. 1 tablespoon in a gallon of warm water is enough. Stir it well, cover the bucket loosely, and let it sit for 3 to 5 days somewhere shaded. Not in the hot sun, not sealed tight like a jar of pickles. You want it covered enough to keep insects out, but loose enough that gases can escape. A good brew will smell earthy, slightly sweet, maybe a little fermented. If it smells like sewage, something has gone wrong, and it does not belong on your vegetables. That smell test matters more than people think. A healthy garden tonic should smell like decomposition, moving in the right direction. A rotten, foul, airless bucket tells you the biology has shifted the wrong way. Pouring that onto already stressed roots is not old-fashioned wisdom. It is just adding stress to stress. When the brew is ready, strain it and dilute it. Again, do not get brave here. 1 part tonic to 10 or 15 parts water is plenty for most established plants. For seedlings, young transplants, or container plants, go weaker. Containers have less soil volume, less buffering power, and much less room for mistakes. A heavy hand in a raised bed may cause a setback. A heavy hand in a 5-gallon pot can ruin the whole plant. Apply it around the base after the soil has been lightly watered or after a mild rain. The roots should be ready to receive it, not sitting in dust and not drowning in mud. This is especially useful for fruiting plants that are beginning to stall. Tomatoes after their first heavy flush. Peppers that bloomed but stopped setting. Cucumbers that started strong and then turned pale. Squash that is all leaf but losing strength. And here is the relieving part. You do not have to get every nutrient perfect. A garden is not a laboratory where every spoonful must be exact. You are not trying to force-feed the plant. You are trying to nudge a tired system back into motion. A mild, balanced feed, used at the right time, can help the plant recover without shocking it. That is why small, repeated corrections usually beat one heavy rescue attempt. But there is one ingredient in that kitchen tonic that deserves extra caution, because gardeners often hear the word magnesium and start using it like a cure-all. Epsom salt can help when the problem is truly magnesium deficiency. Magnesium sits at the heart of chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is what lets leaves capture sunlight. When magnesium runs low, older leaves may turn yellow between the veins, while the veins stay greener. That pattern is different from a plant that is simply pale all over, or a plant whose newest leaves are yellow first. So yes, a small amount of Epsom salt can belong in a rescue mix. 1 teaspoon to 1 tablespoon per gallon, depending on how cautious you want to be, is more than enough for a home garden tonic. But do not keep adding it every week just because a leaf is yellow. If the yellowing is from overwatering, root damage, nitrogen shortage, cold soil, or disease, magnesium will not solve it. That is one of the most common mistakes in backyard gardening, using the right material for the wrong diagnosis. I have seen gardeners pour Epsom salt on tomatoes that were sitting in waterlogged soil. I have seen them give more magnesium to peppers that were actually short on nitrogen. I have seen them spray leaves in hot weather and then wonder why the edges burned. The problem was not that Epsom salt is useless. The problem was that they treated a symptom without reading the plant. The plant always gives more than one clue. Look at which leaves are yellowing first. Older leaves, newer leaves, between the veins, along the edges. Look at the soil moisture. Look at the stem base. Look under the leaves for aphids, mites, mildew, or early blight spots. Look at the weather you just had. A heat wave can stop fruit set. A cold, wet week can slow roots down. A dry container can make a pepper drop blossoms even when the soil mix is fertile. That is why these homemade fertilizers work best in the hands of a gardener who observes before acting. Now, there is one more liquid that belongs in this conversation, and it is older than all the kitchen tricks. Before bags of blue crystals, before bottled feeds, before garden centers lined entire shelves with plant food, farms ran on compost, manure, cover crops, and returning organic matter back to the land. That was not romantic. It was practical. If nutrients left the soil in the harvest, something had to bring them back. For a home gardener, aged manure tea can be one of the most effective liquid feeds available. It can also be one of the easiest to misuse. The word aged is not optional. Fresh manure does not belong around edible crops in a casual backyard setup. It can carry pathogens, weed seeds, and more ammonia than young roots can handle. A gardener can burn an entire row of seedlings with one strong bucket of fresh manure liquid. That is not a small mistake. That is a season lost in 2 days. So use only aged or well-composted manure from a source you trust. Chicken, cow, horse, sheep, goat, or rabbit manure can all be useful, but each behaves differently. Chicken manure is strong and high in nitrogen. Cow manure is gentler and more balanced. Rabbit manure is one of the milder manures and is valued by many small growers because it is less likely to burn when handled correctly. But even then, caution is cheap insurance. The method is simple. Put a shovelful of aged manure into a porous bag. An old pillowcase, burlap sack, or mesh laundry bag can work. Tie it shut and lower it into a 5-gallon bucket of water. Let it steep for 3 to 5 days in the shade. What you are making is not a sludge, it is a liquid extract. The solids stay in the bag. The water pulls out soluble nutrients and some microbial life. By the end, the water should look like weak tea, not black paint. If it is too dark, dilute it more. If it smells sharp, sour, or rotten, be careful. Good manure tea should smell earthy and barn-like, not foul. Before using it, dilute it until it is the color of weak iced tea. For many gardens, 1 part manure tea to 10 parts water is a sensible starting point. With young plants, go weaker. With containers, go weaker. With leafy crops you plan to harvest soon, be especially careful and keep it on the soil only. Never spray manure tea on leaves, herbs, lettuce, or fruit. That is not negotiable. Keep it at the root zone, apply it to soil, and avoid splashing. If you grow food for your family, cleanliness matters. Old school does not mean careless. The growers who used these methods well respected manure because they knew it could feed a field or ruin one. Timing also matters. Apply it early in the morning or in the cool of evening, never in the hard heat of the day. When soil is cooler, moisture holds longer, roots take up nutrients more steadily, and the plant is under less stress. Feeding a wilted plant at 2 o'clock on a hot afternoon is like asking a tired man to eat a heavy meal while he is running uphill. Give the plant a chance to drink when it can actually use what you are offering. That is where the whole method becomes less about recipes and more about judgment. A weak plant does not need panic. It needs a gardener who slows down for 30 seconds and reads the situation. Is the soil dry, wet, compacted, or loose? Are the older leaves fading first, or the newest ones? Are flowers dropping because the plant is hungry, or because a heat wave pushed daytime temperatures too high? Are the roots asking for food, or are they asking for air? That small pause is what separates a useful homemade fertilizer from a bucket of trouble. Because every liquid we have talked about has a place, onion skin water is gentle. It is useful when a plant needs a light mineral push and you do not want to shock it. Fermented rice water is not a full meal for the plant, but it can help wake up tired soil life when used lightly and diluted. Vegetable scrap liquid is stronger, better for plants that truly need nitrogen, but it has to be fermented, strained, and weakened before it goes near the roots. The balanced kitchen tonic gives a broader range of support, especially for fruiting crops that have started to slow down. Aged manure tea is the old heavy tool, powerful and useful, but only when it is aged, diluted, and applied safely. The mistake is using all of them at once. That is what excited gardeners do. They hear 5 methods. They mix 5 buckets, and suddenly every weak plant in the yard gets treated like it is in an emergency room. More liquids, more feeding, more stirring, more pouring. Then the leaves curl, the roots struggle, the soil smells sour, and the gardener blames the method. The real problem was overload. A garden can only process so much at one time. Soil needs air as much as it needs food. Roots need oxygen. Microbes need balance. If you keep pouring fermented liquids into a bed that is already wet, you are not feeding the garden anymore. You are crowding the root zone and pushing it toward the kind of sour, low-oxygen condition that causes more stress. So here is the practical rule I would use in a real backyard. Choose one liquid for the problem you actually see. If a tomato is pale, but the soil smells healthy and drains well, try a mild nitrogen feed from diluted green scrap liquid. If a container pepper is tired after setting fruit, use a light balanced tonic. If a raised bed has been producing hard and the soil feels lifeless, use diluted fermented rice water once and then follow with compost or mulch. If a plant is simply stressed from heat, do not force feed it. Shade it during the worst part of the day, water deeply at the root zone, and wait until it is actively growing again before feeding. That last part matters. A plant under heavy stress cannot always use food well. During a heat wave, tomatoes and peppers may drop flowers even in good soil. In cold spring ground, young roots may sit there doing almost nothing, even if nutrients are present. After transplanting, a plant may need a few days to rebuild root contact before it can take up much of anything. Feeding too hard during those moments is like pushing a tired plant when it needs recovery first. The hopeful part is that most garden problems give you a window before they become permanent. A yellowing tomato does not fail in one afternoon. A pepper does not stop setting fruit for no reason. A cucumber does not go pale without a cause. The plant starts showing you small signs first. If you catch those signs early, you can often correct the direction before the harvest is lost. Not every plant will come back, and any honest grower will tell you that. But far more plants are saved by early, mild correction than by late, desperate feeding. And that is why kitchen waste is worth learning. Not because banana peels are magic. Not because onion skins are secret medicine. Not because rice water replaces compost, or coffee grounds fix every soil, or manure tea should be poured over everything green. Those ideas are too simple. The real value is that these materials keep fertility moving in a small garden. They put scraps back into the system. They give the gardener options between doing nothing and buying another plastic bottle. A self-reliant garden is built on those options. When you rinse rice, you see soil life instead of drain water. When you peel onions, you see a light extract instead of trash. When coffee grounds cool in the filter, you see organic matter. When eggshells dry on the counter, you see slow calcium for the long run. When a few vegetables go soft in the fridge, you see a future feed instead of waste. That shift changes how you garden. But it also changes how you buy. Once you understand what your soil actually needs, you stop chasing every product that promises bigger tomatoes, greener leaves, stronger roots, faster harvests, and miracle growth by next weekend. You become harder to fool. You still buy what is useful when it is truly needed. But you stop treating the garden center like the only source of fertility. The garden becomes less dependent on purchases and more dependent on observation, compost, water management, mulch, and steady returning of organic matter. That is how old, productive gardens are built. They are not fed by one dramatic fix. They are fed by habits. A little compost before planting, mulch before summer heat, deep watering instead of daily sprinkling, scraps redirected instead of thrown away, weak plants checked before they are pulled, strong liquids diluted before they touch the soil, fresh manure kept far away from food crops, leaves watched closely, roots respected. Simple habits, repeated long enough, become a system. And once that system is working, the garden starts to forgive small mistakes. A dry week does not ruin everything. A heavy rain does not wash the whole bed empty. A tomato that stalls has enough support around it to recover. A pepper in a container has a gardener who notices before it crashes. The soil becomes less like a bag of dirt and more like a living reserve. That is what most people are really trying to build, even if they do not say it that way. They want a garden that feeds them, not just a garden that looks good in June, not just a few plants that survive until the first heat wave. They want tomatoes that keep coming, herbs that stay useful, cucumbers that do not quit early, beans that produce more than one picking, soil that improves instead of empties out, and a harvest that feels worth the work. These 5 liquids can help with that, but only when they are used with restraint. Start small, use one method at a time, dilute more than you think you need to. Apply to the soil, not the leaves. Keep anything manure-based away from edible surfaces. Watch the plant for several days before repeating, and if the plant responds, do not rush to double the dose. Let the recovery continue at its own pace. A garden does not reward impatience for long. The next time a tomato begins to yellow, a pepper drops its flowers, or a cucumber starts to fade at the edge of the bed, do not reach for the shovel first. Check the soil. Check the roots. Check the pattern of the leaves. Then look at what your kitchen has been throwing away. The answer may not be expensive. It may not be complicated. It may already be sitting in a jar, a bucket, a peel, a shell, or a handful of scraps waiting to be returned to the ground. And that is the old lesson worth keeping. Waste is often just fertility in the wrong place. If you learned something useful today, type GROW in the comments so I know you are putting these old garden methods back to work. And if this helped you save even one plant this season, press like and share it with another gardener who might be ready to give up too soon.